Two little girls, only 8 years old, stumbled barefoot through the biting snow. Their breaths came out in shaky clouds, vanishing into the frozen night. One clutched a thin blanket to her chest, the other carried their newborn baby brother close, shielding his tiny body against the icy wind. Cast out into the darkness with nowhere to turn, trembling and alone, except for Ranger. The old German shepherd, once a proud K9, now their guardian angel in fur, padded at their side. He had been their father's last gift before death stole him away. And what he would soon uncover was not just cruelty, but a web of betrayal, greed, and a fight for a family that no one, not even the darkest heart, could destroy. But before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments, and if you believe loyalty can save lives, hit that subscribe button, because this story will break you first, then mend what's left of your heart. The winter sun had already sunk low behind the trees, leaving the small town of Willow Creek painted in dull shades of silver and gray. Frost clung stubbornly to the bare branches of elm trees that lined the cracked sidewalks, while the wind cut through gaps in fences and whistled across chimneys like a warning voice. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Inside one faded, two-story house, its once blue paint now flaking into pale patches. 3 children huddled together in the dim yellow glow of a weak kitchen bulb. That house, once filled with laughter, had long ago stopped feeling like home. Harper Carter, the elder of the twin sisters by only 6 minutes, stood at the counter, her thin frame rigid with nerves. At 8 years old, her chestnut hair was tied back in a ponytail that brushed her small shoulders. Her hazel eyes, darker than the others, already carried the weight of someone who had seen too much sadness. Every step she took was careful, quiet, as though any sudden sound might unleash something she could not stop. Her twin, Hazel, sat nearby on the worn couch. Though she looked nearly identical, same hair, same height, same eyes, her features softened into a rounder face, her expression timid and ready to spill into tears. She clutched baby Noah close, rocking him gently as his fever flushed his cheeks red. Only a few weeks old, he breathed with shallow gasps, lips parched and trembling. His tiny body was wrapped in nothing more than a thin, faded blanket, far too fragile for the cold gnawing at the windows. And then there was Clara Whitmore, their step-aunt, standing like a shadow over them all. Tall, sharp-featured, her cheekbones cut like stone, and her auburn hair pinned into a perfect knot. To the neighbors, she was a respectable widow, a woman who had nobly taken in her late brother-in-law's children. But behind her polished smile, Clara's heart was cold. Inside these walls, she saw the children not as orphans to be cherished, but as keys to the inheritance she believed she deserved. That evening, Harper's hands shook as she scooped formula into a chipped baby bottle. She knew the rule Clara had carved into her like scripture. 1 scoop of powder, 1 bottle, 1 time a day. No exceptions. But tonight, Noah burned with fever, his weak cries filling the room with desperation. Harper bit her lip, fighting the tremor in her fingers, then dared to add a second scoop. Her whisper was almost a prayer. "Just this once, Noah. Please get stronger. Please stop crying." She shook the bottle, the faint scent of milk filling the air like hope itself. Hazel's eyes widened, fear flickering across her face. "Harper, if she finds out—" Harper looked back firmly, voice low but steady. "He needs it. I don't care what happens to me. He can't go hungry tonight." The fragile moment shattered with the creak of footsteps. Clara's tall figure filled the doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes like shards of glass. Her fitted black sweater and pearl earrings only sharpened her cold smirk. "And what?" she hissed. "Do you think you're doing?" Harper froze, knuckles white around the bottle. Hazel tightened her hold on Noah, his tiny fists curling against her chest. Aunt Clara, Noah has a fever, Harper stammered. Just tonight, please. I told you one scoop, Clara snapped, her voice slicing the air. One, and you dare steal from me? She strode forward, heels clicking like gunfire on the wood floor. In one swift motion, she tore the bottle from Harper's hands and tilted it upside down, letting the milk splash across the floorboards. White liquid spread in cruel little rivers at Harper's knees. If you want milk, Clara said coldly, beg for it in the street. Noah's cries rose, piercing, cutting through the stillness of the house. Harper dropped to her knees, hands clasped, tears streaking her cheeks. Please, Aunt Clara. I'll scrub the floors, I'll wash the laundry. I'll do everything twice over. Just don't let him suffer. Clara bent down, her perfume sharp, her lips curling into a sneer. Then, crack! Her hand whipped across Harper's cheek. The pains. Slap rang out, the ponytail swinging with the force. Outside! All of you! Hazel cried out as Clara seized Harper by the hair, dragging her across the floor. Noah wailed in terror, clinging to Hazel's shirt. The front door burst open, spilling icy wind into the room. Clara shoved Harper onto the porch, then yanked Hazel forward, nearly sending the baby tumbling from her arms. This house doesn't feed thieves, Clara spat. Go rot in the cold. But before she could slam the door, a deep growl rose from the stairwell. Ranger stepped into view, his sable coat flecked with gray, ears pricked high, teeth bared. The retired K9, silent until now, planted himself between Clara and the children. His growl deepened into fierce barking, the sound echoing through the hallway until curtains stirred in nearby houses. Clara's eyes flickered, her mask cracking. Fear. Then rage. Take your mutt and get out, she snarled. Don't you ever come back. She hurled an old suitcase after them, its latch snapping as it spilled open, a few threadbare clothes and a stuffed rabbit missing one eye tumbling into the snow. Then the door slammed, the lock clicking sharp as a gunshot. The twins huddled, together on the porch. Noah's cries muffled against Hazel's chest. Harper's cheek burned, her tears freezing where they fell. Ranger circled once, then pressed against them, firm, protective, refusing to move. Snowflakes drifted down, settling on their bare feet, their suitcase, their hope. The warmth of the house was gone. The cold had claimed them. Across town, lights still glowed in the courthouse. Sheriff Olivia Grant, early 40s, with steady gray eyes and dark hair brushing her shoulders, leaned over her cluttered desk. Her jacket was draped on her chair, sleeves rolled as she studied a report labeled Carter Accident. Case closed. But the photos told another story. The brake lines on the wrecked car looked too clean, too sharp, too deliberate. Her instincts whispered, accidents don't leave marks like that. She tapped her pen, jaw tightening. Get me the mechanic who inspected the Carter vehicle, she said into the phone. I want him in my office tomorrow morning. Outside her window, Willow Creek slept, under the hush of falling snow. But for Sheriff Olivia Grant, the night had only just begun. And for the children shivering outside Clara Whitmore's door, a darker chapter was already unfolding, crunching the snow. The driver's door opened and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. He was in his early 50s, his hair more salt than pepper, cropped short. His face was weathered, lined by years of smoke, heat, and loss. Yet his gray eyes held a quiet steadiness that belied the storm around him. He wore a heavy canvas jacket, scuffed boots, and carried himself with the careful movements of someone who had known danger and survived it. Easy, boy, Thaman murmured, raising a gloved hand toward Ranger. The German shepherd's growl softened into a cautious whine, and then recognition flickered in his amber eyes. He barked twice, tail lifting slightly as though greeting an old comrade. The man froze, his breath visible in the cold air. Ranger! His voice cracked unexpectedly. He stepped closer, kneeling in the snow despite the cold. Ranger pressed his head briefly against the man's hand, a gesture of trust. The man exhaled, his shoulders trembling. "My God," he whispered. "I thought I'd never see you again." Harper and Hazel exchanged a confused glance. Harper tightened her hold on Noah. "Do you know him?" she asked timidly. "Gee!" The man looked up at the children, his expression softening. "Yes," he said after a pause. "I do. My name is Ethan Caldwell. I used to be a firefighter here in Willow Creek. Ranger. He served with our unit. He saved lives in the blaze 10 years ago." His eyes lingered on the dog, shimmering with old grief. Ethan stood, brushing snow from his knees. He studied the children, their thin coats, their trembling lips, and the feverish baby. His voice deepened with concern. "Why are you out here in the cold? Where's your home?" Neither Harper nor Hazel spoke at first. Harper's chin lifted in fragile defiance. "We don't have one anymore." Her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked from Harper's flushed face to Hazel's wide, fearful eyes, then to Noah's tiny form, shivering against the wind. Something inside him. Something long dormant since the day he lost his wife and son in a fire shifted. He couldn't leave them here. "Get in the truck," Ethan said quietly but firmly. "All of you and you too, Ranger." The girls hesitated only a moment before Harper stepped forward. Ranger gave a soft push with his muzzle against Hazel's leg, urging them toward the warmth. Inside the truck, the heater blasted feebly, but felt like heaven after the bitter cold. Ethan spread a thick woolen blanket across their laps, tucking it around Noah. The baby whimpered once, then nuzzled into the warmth. The drive back to Ethan's cabin was silent, except for the hum of the engine. Harper sat stiffly, one arm curled protectively around Noah, the other gripping Hazel's hand. Ranger lay across their feet like a living shield. Ethan's hands gripped the wheel tightly, his eyes flicking off into the rear-view mirror, where the reflections of the children seemed almost unreal, as if fate had placed them there to test him. When they reached his cabin, a sturdy wooden house nestled among pine trees, Ethan hurried them inside. The air smelled faintly of pine logs and smoke. He stoked the fire until flames leapt bright and steady, then moved to the kitchen. Pots clattered, the scent of broth filling the small space. Harper, still wary, stood near the hearth, rocking Noah, while Hazel sank to the rug, exhausted. Ranger stretched out beside her, head on his paws, but eyes watchful. "You can sit," Ethan said gently, setting a pot of soup on the table. "It's nothing fancy, just chicken soup, bread." "But it's hot," Hazel whispered. "Thank you." Almost inaudible, Harper only nodded, clutching Noah tighter, but her eyes betrayed hunger and relief. Ethan poured bowls of steaming soup, slid one toward. "Harper, eat. You'll need strength." His own voice wavered slightly as he added, "I know what it's like to lose a home." He didn't explain further. Not yet. Ranger padded to Noah's side, resting close to the baby's blanket. He sniffed gently, then settled with his body curled protectively as if resuming a duty long ago entrusted to him. Harper, seeing this, finally, let a tear slip down her cheek. That night, for the first time since being thrown into the snow, the children slept in warmth. Ethan sat in the armchair by the fire, watching the flames, his mind heavy with memories. But when his gaze drifted to the children and to Ranger at his post, something within him began to thaw. Perhaps this night had given him not just unexpected guests, but a reason to breathe again. Meanwhile, across town, Sheriff Olivia Grant stood in the cluttered garage of Bill Mercer, the town's longtime mechanic. Bill was in his 60s with a shock of white hair, hands stained by grease, and a voice roughened by years of engines and cigarettes. He leaned over the remains of the Carter vehicle, pointing to the brake system with a grim shake of his head. These lines weren't worn down, Bill said firmly. They were cut, clean, sharp, like with a blade. No way this was an accident. Olivia's eyes darkened. She scribbled notes quickly, her steady hands betraying the weight of her thoughts. "And you're sure?" "Sure as I've ever been," Bill replied, straightening his back. "Somebody wanted that car to crash." As Olivia tucked her notepad into her coat, Bill hesitated. "There's one more thing. Papers came in last week from the Carter estate. Guess who's been handling them?" "Who?" Olivia asked. "Richard Hale. That slick lawyer from the city, always sniffing around inheritance cases. I don't trust him as far as I could throw him." Olivia nodded once, her expression firm. She thanked Bill and stepped back into the cold night. Snowflakes swirled around her as she stared at the dark horizon. The pieces were starting to fit together. An accident that wasn't an inheritance conveniently altered, and children left at the mercy of the wrong guardian. She pulled her scarf tighter and muttered, "Not on my watch." The cabin smelled of pine and wood smoke when dawn broke over Willow Creek. The fire Ethan had tended all night still glowed faintly in the hearth, casting soft light over the children huddled together on the worn rug. Harper stirred first, her cheek pressed against Hazel's shoulder. Noah nestled between them. Ranger lay close, his breathing steady, ears twitching at every small sound outside. For the first time in days, the children had slept without fear, gnawing at their ribs, but the heaviness of what awaited them lingered in the air. Ethan moved quietly around the kitchen. His broad frame filled the space, the steam from his coffee curling up toward the ceiling beams. Though his features were rugged, creased forehead, a nose slightly bent from a long-ago accident, there was agentless in the way he handled the morning tasks. He set out bowls of oatmeal, placed slices of bread beside them, and glanced toward the children with a protective frown. He had not intended to bring anyone into his solitary life again, but fate, it seemed, had decided otherwise. When Harper woke fully, she noticed something odd in the corner of the room. An old wooden box half hidden beneath a stack of books. Its surface was scarred, the edges worn down by years of use. Curiosity flickered in her eyes, while Hazel rubbed sleep from her face, and Ethan busied himself at the stove. Harper crept toward the box. Her fingers trembled slightly as she brushed away dust and lifted the lid. Inside lay papers tied together with string, yellowed envelopes, and a photograph of her father standing beside Ethan in firefighter gear, both smiling, soot-smeared across their faces. Harper's breath caught in her throat. Beneath the photograph were copies of insurance documents. Her eyes darted across the lines until they froze on the bolded words, "Beneficiary Clara Whitmore." Her heart raced. Clara's name, her aunt, the woman who'd thrown them out into the snow. Harper flipped the paper over and saw hurried handwriting scrolled by her father. "If anything happens, don't trust Clara. Give this to Ethan." Tears welled up in Harper's eyes. She clutched the paper to her chest, her small body trembling. The truth washed over her. Her father had suspected something, had feared Clara's betrayal even before the accident. She wanted to shout to demand answers, but her voice shrank inside her. Instead, she whispered, "Dad knew." Ranger's sudden growl broke the fragile silence. His ears shot up, his gaze fixed on the frost-blurred window. He rose, body tense, and padded, slowly toward the sound. Harper stiffened, clutching Noah. Outside, the crunch of snow beneath careful footsteps echoed faintly. A shadow moved across the glass, gone in an instant. Ethan noticed the dog's posture and stepped quickly to the window, pulling back the curtain, but saw nothing more than drifting snow and pine branches swaying in the wind. Still, Ranger remained on edge, his growl low and steady. Ethan laid a hand in the dog's back. "Easy, boy," he muttered, though his eyes darkened with worry. He knew a guard dog's instincts were rarely wrong. Later, as Harper sat with the papers folded tightly in her lap, Ethan finally asked, "Where did you find those?" His tone was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of memories. "In the box," Harper said softly. She handed him the documents. Ethan read them slowly, jaw tightening as the truth surfaced once more. He remembered the night Harper's father had left the box with him, saying only, "Keep this safe. If I'm not around, the kids might need it." Ethan had never looked inside, not wanting to intrude on what he assumed were private matters. Now regret burned through him. "You did the right thing, Harper," he said, folding the papers back. "Your father was trying to protect you." He placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "I'll make sure this doesn't get buried." Meanwhile, across town, Sheriff Olivia Grant was already chasing her suspicions. In the courthouse archives, she leafed through records with sharp, methodical focus. Olivia's dark hair was pulled into a low bun, and her gray eyes scanned each page with the intensity of a hawk. She had learned long ago that details hid in the places most people skimmed over. She found what she was looking for, a notarized document, signed by Harper and Hazel's mother, dated only weeks before her death. The document appeared to update the beneficiaries of the Carter estate, transferring everything to Clara Whitmore. Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line. She had met Mrs. Carter once, a woman gentle but frail in her final year, her hands trembling, even when holding a teacup. Olivia could imagine Clara hovering nearby, guiding her hand toward the signature line under the guise of protecting the children. It wasn't protection. It was theft. The name at the bottom of the notarization leapt out at Olivia. Richard Hale, a well-dressed attorney from Los Angeles, known for his slick manner and history of restructuring estates in ways that always seemed to favor his wealthiest clients. His reputation was whispered more than written, but Olivia had heard enough to know that where Hale's name appeared, manipulation often followed. She picked up the phone, dialing a number she knew well. "This is Sheriff Grant. I need to speak with Prosecutor Allen. Urgent." Within minutes, she was outlining her findings to a calm, steady voice on the other end. Allen was a seasoned prosecutor, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a reputation for patience. Olivia trusted him. "I can't open a full case yet," she admitted. "But I need a file. I need a record that ties Clara Whitmore and Richard Hale together. Because if I'm right, this wasn't an accident. It was a setup for inheritance." "Send me everything," Allen replied firmly. "We'll keep it confidential until the timing is right." "But Olivia, be careful. If they're willing to kill for money once, they might again." Olivia's eyes hardened. She closed the file and looked out at the courthouse steps where snow swirled against the lamplight. "I'll be careful," she said. "But I won't let those kids slip through the cracks." Back at the cabin, Harper, Hazel, and Noah finally ate the oatmeal Ethan had set before them, their hunger overcoming their fear. Harper stole glances at the folded papers Ethan had locked safely in his desk drawer. She felt a mixture of fear and relief, fear that Clara's shadow still reached for them, relief that their father's warning had not been lost. Ranger lay by the window, head resting on his paws, eyes still watchful. The storm outside had eased, but Harper couldn't shake the image of the shadow that had passed across the glass. She leaned against Hazel and whispered, "We're not safe yet." Hazel pressed her lips together, hugging Noah closer. "But at least we're not alone anymore." The fire crackled, Ethan's silhouette steady in the lamplight. Rares's ears twitched, but he remained calm, as if promising silently that he would not let the darkness cross the threshold again. The wind rattled the shutters of Ethan's cabin as dusk pressed in around Willow Creek. A fire burned steadily in the hearth, throwing warm light across the small living room where Harper and Hazel sat with Noah nestled between them. They were cutting scraps of paper into shapes under Hazel's careful hands, trying to make something cheerful out of the evening. Ranger lay sprawled near the door, his chest rising and falling with quiet breaths. though his ears never truly rested. Ethan, still wearing his flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves, carried in an armload of wood and stacked it beside the fire. He looked older than his years, lines etched deep into his forehead, his salt-flecked hair falling over his brow. But there was a new energy in the way he moved. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone. And though he didn't say it aloud, the presence of the children and the dog had softened something in him that grief had kept hard for years. But that fragile peace fractured with a sudden growl. Ranger lifted his head, ears sharp, his amber eyes fixed on the window. The growl deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. Ethan immediately froze, following the dog's gaze. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, though he knew better than to doubt Rare's instincts. Ranger sprang to his feet, rushing to the door. Harper instinctively gathered Noah close while Hazel clutched her sister's sleeve. Ethan grabbed the flashlight from the mantel and swung open the back door. The cold air slashed inside and Ranger bolted out, his bark tearing through the night like a siren. Ethan followed, boots crunching across the snow. The beam of his flashlight cut across there just in time to catch a figure in dark clothing, sprinting toward the tree line. Ranger closed the distance in seconds. The intruder turned, flailing to shove the dog away, but Ranger lunged, his teeth sinking into the man's sleeve and tearing the fabric. The man cried out, twisting violently, and managed to break free, stumbling into the woods. Ranger chased, but Ethan called sharply, "Ranger, back!" The German shepherd returned reluctantly, his breath steaming, the torn scrap of cloth still clinging to his teeth. At Ranger's feet lay a black smartphone dropped in the struggle. Ethan picked it up, his gloved hands cold against the device. The screen lit instantly. No passcode. Messages filled the screen. One standing out bold and chilling. "Bring the children back. Clara needs them to secure guardianship. Do not let the sheriff get involved. The sender, Richard Hale." Ethan's jaw tightened. He pocketed the phone, cast a wary look toward the woods, and returned inside. Harper stared at him wide-eyed, clutching Noah as Hazel whispered, "Was someone out there?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. He showed them the phone, but Ranger did his job. "You're safe. And this?" He lifted the phone slightly. "This tells me exactly who we're up against." Ranger sat tall beside the children, chest puffed out as if declaring his victory. Ethan knelt beside him, running a hand along the dog's fur. "Good boy! You just gave us proof!" Ethan didn't hesitate long. He picked up the landline phone on the counter and dialed the sheriff's office. Within minutes, Sheriff Olivia Grant was on the other end. Her voice was calm, firm, yet carried an edge of fatigue. "Caldwell, what is it?" "We had company tonight," Ethan said. Ranger chased him off, left behind a phone. "There's a message from Richard Hale instructing someone to take the kids back to Clara." There was a pause on the line. Then Olivia's voice sharpened. "Hold on to that phone. Don't let anyone near it. I'll be there first thing in the morning. This could be the link we need." As Ethan hung up, Harper touched his arm. "You believe us now?" "That she'll never stop." He looked into her eyes, steady and unwavering. "I believed you from the start, but now we can prove it." He brushed her hair back gently. "You three, you're not going anywhere. Not while I'm here. For theirest." Of the night, Ethan sat in the chair near the fire, his rifle leaned against the wall. Ranger lay at his feet, head lifted, eyes fixed on the door. Harper and Hazel drifted into uneasy sleep, but Ethan stayed awake, the weight of the children's trust settling on his shoulders like armor. In his heart, the realization grew clear. These children were no longer just guests. They were his responsibility, his family. Across town, Sheriff Olivia Grant wasn't waiting for morning. She had parked her cruiser outside a dimly lit office building on the edge of Willow Creek. Inside, through the frosted glass of a second-floor window, she could see the faint silhouette of Clara Whitmore. Olivia adjusted the small recording device tucked beneath her coat and ascended the creaking stairs. She moved with practiced silence, her boots pressing carefully on the worn carpet. As she neared the office door, faint voices leaked through the wood. "The payout's finished," Clara's clip voice said. "The insurance money came through faster than I expected." Another voice answered, smooth and precise. Richard Hale, tall with dark hair, always slicked back. He was known for his perfectly pressed suits and a smile that never reached his eyes. Hale was a man in his early 50s, outwardly charming, but with a reputation for twisting laws until they broke. "And the children?" he asked. "They're gone," Clara muttered. "But they'll turn up. I'll make sure they end up in the state custody if I have to. Easier to manipulate the system from there." Olivia's stomach tightened. She held her recorder closer to the door frame, the red light blinking steadily. Hale chuckled softly, his tone smooth. "As oil. Good. Once they're placed in care, you can step in as guardian again. The estate remains yours to control, no questions asked." Clara exhaled sharply. "I want them nowhere near that man. Caldwell, he's dangerous. He'll ruin everything." Olivia's eyes narrowed, the pieces falling into place. Clara had not only abused the children, but plotted with Hale to erase them from the inheritance, entirely, disguising it beneath legal paperwork and state bureaucracy. It was a scheme that preyed on orphans, cold, calculated, and merciless. Footsteps creaked inside the office. Olivia slipped quickly back down the stairs, her pulse steady despite the adrenaline in her veins. Outside, snow whispered across the pavement as she leaned against her cruiser, clicking off the recorder. She had what she needed, proof of their collusion. Now it was a matter of time before she struck. Back at the cabin, Ethan finally allowed himself to close his eyes. Ranger shifted closer to the fire, the light flickering across his sable coat. Harper, half asleep, whispered into Hazel's ear. "We're safe tonight because Ranger is here and because Ethan cares." Hazel smiled faintly, kissing Noah's soft forehead. Maybe this is what family feels like. The storm passed quietly over Willow Creek, but the shadows of betrayal still lingered. And now, with a phone full of evidence in Ethan's hand and a recording device in Olivia's, the night's secrets would not stay hidden for long. The courthouse in Willow Creek was not often so full. That morning, however, its marble floors echoed, with hurried footsteps, murmured voices, and the rustle of coats as townspeople slipped in to witness what had already become the talk of the county. Outside, snow still clung to the courthouse steps, though it was stamped down quickly by the crowds. Inside, the air was tense, as though justice itself were holding its breath. Ethan Caldwell sat near the front, his broad shoulders squared, his flannel shirt exchanged for a suit jacket that seemed too formal for him. His weathered hands were clenched together, calluses visible even against the polished wood of the bench. Beside him sat Harper, Hazel, and baby Noah, bundled carefully in. A soft blue blanket. Harper's hazel eyes darted nervously toward the front of the courtroom, her cheeks pale, but her chin lifted. Hazel leaned against Ethan, one hand clasped tightly in her sister's. Ranger lay at their feet, perfectly still but undeniably present, his sable coat gleaming under the harsh lights, ears pry-cricked, eyes alert. Even without words, the dog's presence commanded attention. At the opposite table, Clara Whitmore sat with her hands folded in her lap, dressed in a navy suit that made her look sharper, more controlled than the woman who had once hurled children into the snow. Her auburn hair was pinned immaculately, her lips trembling just enough to appear sympathetic. She dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, a perfect picture of the grieving aunt forced into an impossible situation. Beside her, Richard Hale exuded practiced confidence. His tailored suit was dark and uncreased, his silver tie catching the light as he leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly as if he already knew the verdict. The judge, Honorable Marjorie Whitfield, entered at last. She was in her late 50s with iron-gray hair swept into a bun and eyes as sharp as glass. Her voice carried easily through the room. This emergency session of the Willow Creek County Court is now in order. We are here to determine the custody and welfare of Harper Carter, Hazel Carter, and Noah Carter. Counsel, you may begin. Richard Hale rose smoothly. Your Honor, the facts are simple. Mr. Caldwell, though perhaps well-intentioned, unlawfully took these children from their rightful guardian, Mrs. Clara Whitmore. My client has raised them since their parents' untimely passing. She has provided food, shelter, and care until Mr. Caldwell interfered. This case, at its heart, is about returning children to the family that truly loves them. He turned, gesturing toward Clara. She lowered her eyes, dabbing once more with her handkerchief. Ethan bristled, his hands tightening. Harper felt her stomach twist. She remembered cold floors, empty cupboards, and Clara's hands striking her across the cheek. The lies tasted bitter, but she held Noah closer, waiting for her moment. When it came, it was Sheriff Olivia Grant who stood. She wore her dark uniform, badge polished, her hair tied neatly back. Calm but firm, she approached the bench. Your Honor, I must dispute that narrative. Evidence shows these children were not cared for. They were neglected, abused, and ultimately abandoned in freezing weather. We will present that evidence in due course. The judge nodded gravely. Proceed. The first to take the stand was Harper. She walked forward slowly, her knees trembling. Atha, wooden witness stand. Her small hands fumbled with the microphone until Olivia adjusted it for her. Harper swallowed hard. Do you promise to tell the truth? The bailiff asked. Her voice came out faint but steady. I do. She glanced back at Ethan, who gave her asmal nod of encouragement. Ranger shifted, his amber eyes locked on her, assailant pillar of support. Harper drew in a shaky breath. They gave us 1 spoon of milk a day for Noah, she began. He was sick, but Aunt Clara said no more. When I tried to give him extra, she hit me. Then she dragged us out of the house. It was snowing. She told us never to come back. The courtroom hushed. A murmur rippled from the gallery. Clara's face stiffened, though she quickly feigned sorrow. Richard stood. Objection, Your Honor. Children are impressionable, easily manipulated, but the judge cut him off. Objection overruled. Let the child speak. Harper's voice grew stronger. We thought we'd die that night. If not for Ranger and Mr. Caldwell, we would have. She blinked back tears, looking down at her brother. He saved us. When she stepped down, Ethan's throat tightened. Hazel gave Harper's hand a fierce squeeze. Ranger pressed his head gently against Harper's leg as she passed, as though assuring her she had done well. Next, Olivia presented her evidence. She laid photographs on the judge's desk. The brake lines from the Carters' wrecked vehicle, edges cut clean. This is no accident, she said firmly. This was deliberate tampering. Furthermore, these are copies of the insurance papers recovered from Mr. Caldwell's possession. As you will see, they list Clara Whitmore as sole beneficiary. Despite notes written by the children's father warning specifically against trusting her, the judge examined the documents, her brow furrowed. Olivia held up the black smartphone recovered after Ranger's chase. Finally, this device dropped by, an assailant outside Mr. Caldwell's home. It contains messages from attorney Richard Hale. The words are clear. Bring the children back. Clara needs them to secure guardianship. Do not let the sheriff get involved. Gas spread across the courtroom. Clara's face drained of color. Richard's smile faltered, though he quickly rose, attempting to deflect. Your Honor, that phone could have been fabricated, but Olivia was ready. She lifted a USB drive. Forensic authentication was completed yesterday. The messages are genuine, traced to Mr. Hale's office. The judge leaned back, eyes sharp on Richard. Counsel, this is a grave accusation. Do you deny sending these? Richard's jaw tightened. For once, his silver tongue failed him. "I reserve my right to silence until noted," Judge Whitfield said, her tone cold. But silence here speaks volumes. As the main hearing paused, news spread quietly through the building. In a separate chamber, Richard Hale had been caught hours earlier attempting to bribe Janet Moore, a mid-level court clerk. Janet, a woman in her late 30s with dark curls and weary eyes, had agreed to wear a wire under Olivia's direction. Richard's offer, cash in exchange for delaying the introduction of evidence, was captured in full in court. Olivia presented the recording. Richard's voice played clearly. "Just misplaced the file for a day or two. I'll make it worth your while." Janet's trembling reply, "This isn't right," sealed the moment. The gallery erupted in whispers. Clara's hands shook. Richard's composure cracked, his eyes darting as though seeking escape. The judge struck her gavel sharply. "Order!" Silence returned. Olivia closed her folder, her gaze steady. "Your Honor, this is not only a case of neglect. It is a conspiracy involving fraud, obstruction, and deliberate harm." For the first time, Clara's mask slipped completely, her lips pressed tight, her eyes dark with fury. The courtroom saw her not as a grieving aunt, but as the woman who had condemned children to freeze for the sake of money. Ranger gave a single low bark. It cut through the silence like a seal on the truth. Judge Whitfield's face remained stern, but her voice was measured. "The court has heard enough for today. Deliberations will continue, but the evidence is compelling. These children will remain in protective custody with Mr. Caldwell until final ruling." As the gavel struck, Harper clutched Hazel's hand. Ethan exhaled slowly, his shoulders easing just slightly. Ranger sat tall, watching Clara with unblinking eyes. For once, Clara looked away. The courtroom was silent when Judge Marjorie Whitfield returned with the ruling. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the high windows, as if the sky itself was holding its breath for the children seated in the front row. Harper gripped Hazel's hands so tightly their knuckles turned white. Ethan sat beside them, his shoulders stiff, his jaw tight. Ranger lay at their feet, calm but alert, the steady thrum of his breathing grounding them all. Judge Whitfield's eyes swept across the room, pausing briefly on Clara Whitmore and Richard Hale. Clara satrigid, her once immaculate hair now slightly askew, her face pale and drawn. Richard still wore his tailored suit, but his composure had cracked. His hands drummed nervously against the table, betraying the calm mask he tried to maintain. "This court," Judge Whitfield began, her voice carrying steady authority, "finds that the evidence presented is overwhelming." Clara Whitmore, "You are guilty of child neglect, abuse, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to seize assets. You are hereby sentenced to 20 years in state prison." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Clara's lips parted as if to protest, but no words came. Her hands trembled as deputies moved closer. The judge turned her gaze to Richard Hale. "You, Richard Hale, are guilty of falsifying legal documents, bribery, obstruction of justice, and collusion in endangering minors. You are sentenced to 25 years in state prison. This court cannot overlook the weight of your actions, nor the lives you endangered in pursuit of greed." Richard's shoulder slumped, his smooth words finally failing him. He opened his mouth, but the only sound was the clink of handcuffs as deputies secured his wrist. The gavel struck. "This case is closed. For Harper, Hazel, and Ethan," the sound echoed, like a door slamming on the past and another opening toward something new. Harper turned toward Ethan, her small body trembling with the release of months of fear. She leapt forward, throwing her arms around his neck. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered into his ear, her voice breaking, "We have a family now." Ethan's throat closed. He pressed a calloused hand against her back, his own tears blurring his vision. For so many years, grief had carved hollow spaces inside him. But in that moment, with Harper's words still warm against High Seer, those hollow places began to fill. Hazel leaned into his side, resting her head against his arm, while Noah slept soundly, in his carrier. Ranger shifted, laying his head near the baby's feet, eyes closed, but ears prick-cricked, ever watchful, even in rest. The courtroom emptied slowly, whispers following Clara and Richard as they were led away in chains. Some onlookers shook their heads in disbelief. Others murmured prayers for the children, but Harper and Hazel barely noticed. For them, the world had narrowed to Ethan's steady embrace and the quiet certainty that they were no longer alone. Later. That afternoon, the children returned to Ethan's cabin under the official supervision of Grace Whitman, a caseworker from Child Protective Services. Grace was in her 30s with gentle brown eyes and a kind smile. She carried a worn leather satchel filled with forms and notebooks. Her presence, though professional, radiated warmth. For now, Grace explained as she walked them inside, custody will be temporary under Mr. Caldwell's care, with monthly check-ins. But if everything continues as it has, this home could become permanent. Harper's heart swelled at the word home. She looked around the cabin, the pine table, the worn rug, the fire crackling in the hearth, and for the first time, she believed it could truly be theirs. That evening, Ethan prepared stew, his broad hands steady as he chopped vegetables. Harper and Hazel set the table, carefully arranging mismatched plates. Noah stirred faintly in his blanket, while Ranger stretched, near the fire, sighing as though finally content. When the bowls were filled and the bread passed around, Harper sat up straighter and declared, "This is our family dinner." Ethan smiled through tears, unable to speak. Across town, Sheriff Olivia Grant walked quietly through the cemetery, her breath visible in the frosty air. She carried a small bouquet of winter flowers, placing them gently at the grave of Daniel and Sarah Carter. The parents who had been stolen from their children, Olivia stood for a long moment, her gloved hands folded in front of her. "Justice came," she whispered softly. "Your children are safe now. Clara and Hale can't touch them anymore. I promise I'll keep watching over them." Her voice trembled, though her posture remained strong. In her line of work, victories were rare, but this one felt like more than law. It felt like restoring something sacred. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "Dinner's ready, if you'd like to join us." Olivia hesitated, then smiled faintly. Perhaps, she thought, there was space in her own life for something gentler than reports and evidence. When Olivia arrived at the cabin, the children greeted her with shy smiles. Harper clutched a notebook to her chest. "I have something to read," she said. She opened the book and read aloud her school assignment, her small voice filling, "The room. Family is where no one is left behind." Ethan's eyes glistened as he sat at the head of Thedable. Olivia took the empty chair beside him, her heart softening in a way she hadn't felt in years. Hazel giggled as Noah grabbed her finger while Ranger shifted closer to the table, tail sweeping the floor like a soft drumbeat. Harper set the notebook down, cheeks glowing with pride. For a moment, silence fell, not heavy like in the courtroom, but warm like a quilt wrapped around them all. Ethan looked around the table at Harper's determined eyes, Hazel's timid smile, Noah's small, perfect face, Ariar's loyal gaze, and Olivia's steady presence. His voice cracked as he spoke. This is family." Ranger let out a low sigh, his eyes closing at last, as if confirming that his mission to protect, to guard, to lead these children into safety was fulfilled. Ethan reached down, resting his hand on the dog's thick fur. Tears shone in Olivia's eyes, but she smiled. For once, the burdens of justice gave way to the gift of peace. The cabin filled with the sound of laughter, clinking spoons, and children's voices. In that simple moment, they were not survivors of tragedy, nor witnesses in a trial. They were a family bound not by blood, but by choice, by loyalty, and by love. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or lightning. They come quietly through an open door, a kind hand, or the loyalty of a faithful dog. In moments when life feels cold and unforgiving, God often sends someone to remind us that we are never truly alone. Family is not always the one we are born into, but the one He places in our path built from love, sacrifice, and trust. As you reflect on this story, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about the moments when kindness touched your life, or when you felt God's hand guiding you through hardship. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, so these stories of hope can continue reaching hearts that need them most. May the Lord bless you and your loved ones, surround you with protection, and fill your home with peace and love each